The first time I realized my ex-mother-in-law had completely lost her mind was when I found 6 old women from her church circling my 15-year-old daughter like vultures at the farmer's market, hissing at her about being an ungrateful little sinner. My baby was shaking, clutching a bag of chocolate like it was a shield. I didn't think. I just moved. One second, I was browsing honey jars, and the next, I was shoving through the crowd like a woman possessed. My oldest daughter, Lily, was already ahead of me, her face twisted in fury. By the time I got there, my youngest, Emma, was crying, her birthday treat forgotten on the ground. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snarled, stepping between Emma and them. The ringleader, a prune-faced woman with a cross the size of a dinner plate around her neck, smirked. "We're just reminding this child of her Christian duty. Family is sacred." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, is that why you're harassing a kid in public? Because family?" Lily came back then, shoving past them to grab Emma's stuff from the ground. One of the women tried to stop her, and I saw red. "Touch my daughter again," I said, voice low, "and I don't care how old you are, I will end you." They recoiled. Good. The market manager kicked us all out, but I didn't care. I herded my girls to the car, those women still whispering behind us like a bad chorus. Emma was silent the whole ride home, staring at her lap. Lily was vibrating with rage. "They called us bastards," she finally spat. Again. That word. That fucking word. It wasn't the first time my ex-in-laws had thrown it at my girls. But sending their church brigade after us? That was new. That night, after the girls were in bed, I called Mark, one of the few decent people left in that church. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. "You saw the post, didn't you?" he said before I could speak. "What post?" He sighed. "Oh, you're gonna love this." Turns out, my ex-Mil had spun quite the tale for her congregation. According to her, I was a heartless witch who stole her son's money, abandoned his poor surrogate babies, and turned his daughters against their own flesh and blood. The comments were a flood of prayer hands and rage. But here's the thing about holy rollers, they hate cheaters. And I had proof. So I got to work. By morning, I had a stack of binders thicker than my thumb, filled with every text, email, and photo that proved my ex was a lying, cheating snake, and his parents knew everything. The piece de resistance? A screenshot of my ex-Mil calling my girls bastards and blaming them for their father's death. I slipped those binders into the church's hymn bookshelf before service. The fallout was glorious. By noon, the church's Facebook page was a war zone. My ex-in-laws were getting roasted harder than a Sunday ham. The best part? The pastor himself called their behavior unchristian. 2 apology letters arrived by Monday. But my ex-Mil? Oh, she wasn't done. She posted some weepy nonsense about being abandoned in her old age, like she hadn't spent years enabling her son's bullshit. Too bad for her, I keep receipts. And I wasn't afraid to burn them all down. The apology letters were nice, but they didn't erase the way Emma flinched every time her phone buzzed for a week after the market incident. Or how Lily started sleeping with a baseball bat next to her bed, like she was waiting for another ambush. I should have let it go. Maybe. But then the emails started. Anonymous ones, at first, long, rambling sermons about forgiveness and honoring my father and mother. Then came the handwritten notes, slipped into our mailbox. One of them had a Bible verse scribbled in shaky cursive, "A disobedient child is a mother's shame." Lily found it first. She threw it on the kitchen table like it was on fire. "They're not stopping," she said, her voice tight. "They're never gonna stop." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. But the truth was, I knew these people. They didn't quit. They just got quieter, sneakier, until you started doubting whether you were the crazy one. So I did the only thing I could think of, I went back to that damn church. Not for service. Oh no. I waited until Wednesday night, when the prayer group met. The same group my ex-MIL had been running for 20 years. The same group full of the same women who'd cornered my daughter. I walked in like I owned the place. The room went dead silent. A dozen pairs of eyes locked onto me, some wide with shock, others already narrowing in disapproval. My ex-MIL sat at the head of the table, her mouth hanging open like a broken cabinet door. "Sarah," she finally managed, her voice all syrup and knives. "What a surprise." I smiled. "Bet it is." I didn't sit. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "See, I got this problem. Somebody's been sending my kids letters. Real nasty stuff. And I figured, since y'all are so big on Christian values, maybe you could help me out." One of the women, the same one from the market, scoffed. "If your children feel guilty, that's between them and the Lord." I laughed. "Oh, Barbara. Still talking out of your ass, huh?" The room gasped. My ex-MIL turned purple. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. A second later, the room filled with the sound of my ex-MIL's voice, tinny but clear from a recorded call. "Those girls are just like their mother, selfish, wicked. If they had just accepted their brothers, none of this would have happened." I'd saved that voicemail from months ago. Just in case. The silence was thicker than church potluck gravy. My ex-MIL shot up so fast her chair screeched. That's taken out of context." "Is it?" I tilted my head. "Because it sounds like you blaming two kids for their dad's affair. Sounds like harassment." Barbara opened her mouth, but the pastor, who'd been standing in the back, unnoticed until now, cleared his throat. "Ladies. I think we need to pray. Not for me. For them." I left before they could start. But not before locking eyes with my ex-MIL. Her hands were shaking. Good. Let her tremble. The letters stopped after that. But I knew better than to think it was over. Because when you rip the mask off a wolf, it doesn't slink away. It just gets hungrier. For 2 weeks, it was quiet. Too quiet. No letters. No sudden visits from concerned church members. Even my ex-MIL's Facebook page went radio silent. No more pity party posts about abandoned grandparents or wicked daughters. I should have been relieved. But I knew better. People like her don't just stop. They regroup. They plot. And when they come back, it's always worse. I found out just how right I was on a Tuesday morning. Lily was supposed to be at school. Emma too. But at 9:17 a.m., my phone blew up with a call from the high school's office. "Mrs. Carter? Your daughter was just checked out early by her grandmother." Ice shot through my veins. "What grandmother?" I hissed. Because my mother lived 3 states away. And my ex-MIL sure as hell wasn't on any pickup list. The secretary's voice turned nervous. She had paperwork. Custody documents. Said it was an emergency family matter. I was out the door before she finished speaking. The school was only 10 minutes away. I made it in 6. By the time I screeched into the parking lot, Lily was already outside, pacing near the office doors, her face pale. "Alone. Where's Emma?" I demanded as I jumped out of the car. Lily's hands were shaking. "She took her. Said they were going to get ice cream. But Mom, she had a court order." My blood turned to fire. I didn't wait for explanations. Just shoved Lily into the car and peeled out of there, dialing my lawyer so fast I nearly dropped the phone. "They kidnapped her," I spat the second he answered. My ex-MIL faked custody papers and took Emma. He swore. "Call the police. Now." I did. Then I called the only other person who might know where that witch would go. Mark picked up on the first ring. "They're at the church," he said before I could speak. "She's got half the ladies' auxiliary with her. There is Sarah, they're baptizing Emma." The world went red. I don't remember the drive. Don't remember running through those church doors. But I'll never forget the sight of Emma, drenched and shaking in a white dress 2 sizes too big, my ex-Emma's bony hands gripping her shoulders like claws as some deacon droned on about cleansing rebellious spirits. Emma saw me first. Her scream cracked the room in half. Noem. Then all hell broke loose. The police showed up 2 minutes later. Turns out, faking legal documents is a felony. So is holding a minor against their will. My ex-Emma learned that the hard way. But as they cuffed her, she still had the nerve to smile at me. She's his child too, she whispered. You don't get to keep them forever. That's when I realized this wasn't about love. It was about possession. And she wasn't done fighting. Neither was I. The police took my ex-Emma away in handcuffs, but the damage was already done. Emma wouldn't stop shaking. Her hair was still wet from the forced baptism, her fingers clutching mine like I might vanish if she let go. Lily hadn't said a word since we left the church, just sat in the back seat with her arms wrapped around her sister, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. I should have taken them straight home. Should have let them crawl into bed and process what had just happened. But I was done playing defense. So instead, I drove to the courthouse. My lawyer met us outside, his face grim. Sarah, you don't have to do this today. Yes, I said, my voice steady in a way my hands weren't. I do. The emergency restraining order hearing lasted 17 minutes. 17 minutes of listening to my ex-Emma's lawyer, some slick, baby-faced guy who smelled like too much cologne, argue that this was all a misunderstanding. That my ex-Emma was just a grieving grandmother, desperate to keep her son's memory alive. That Emma had wanted to be baptized. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and a voice like a slamming gavel, didn't buy it. Especially not after she saw the video. The one Mark had recorded on his phone. The one where Emma was sobbing, begging to leave, while my ex-Emma hissed "You'll thank me later" into her ear. The restraining order was granted before the ink on my ex-Emma's arrest paperwork had even dried. But as we walked out of the courthouse, Lily finally spoke. This isn't over, she muttered, kicking a pebble across the pavement. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That we'd won. But I knew better. Because when we got home, there was a package on our porch. No return address. No postage. Just my ex-husband's name scrawled across the front in shaky handwriting. Inside? A Bible. His old one, the one he'd carried to church every Sunday. And tucked between the pages of Psalms was a single photograph, one I'd never seen before. My ex-husband, grinning like the cat who got the cream, with his arms around his affair partner. And his parents standing right beside them, smiling like it was a damn family portrait. Dated 3 months before I'd ever found out about the affair. Lily snatched it from my hands before I could react. For a second, she just stared. Then, without a word, she walked to the kitchen, struck a match, and held the flame to the corner of the photo. We watched it burn in silence. But as the ashes curled into the sink, Emma whispered the question that had been eating at me since the church. Why do they hate us so much? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't about religion. Or even about family. This was a war. And I was done letting them set the terms. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. I was out of bed before my eyes were fully open, heart hammering against my ribs. The girls' doors were still shut, but the noise had come from the front of the house. I grabbed the fire poker from the hearth and crept down the hall, every nerve on high alert. The living room window was shattered. A brick lay in the middle of the couch, surrounded by glittering shards. Tied around it with twine was a note. Judgment comes for the wicked. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I was past fear. Now I was angry. Lily appeared in the doorway, her baseball bat already in hand. Who the hell? Church people, I said flatly, tossing the note onto the coffee table. Go check on Emma. While she did, I called the police. Again. The officer who showed up was the same one from the church incident. He took one look at the brick and sighed. Ma'am, you've got to stop poking the hornet's nest. I stared at him. Did you just blame me for this? He had the decency to look ashamed. No, but nothing. My voice was steel. I want a patrol car outside my house tonight. And if you won't do it, I'll call the damn news and let them ask why the police won't protect 2 kids from harassment. He got the patrol car. But I still didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and did what I should have done months ago, dug into my ex-in-law's finances. Turns out, grief wasn't their only motive. My ex's life insurance payout? Gone. Drained in 3 months flat. His parents' mortgage? 2 months overdue. And the kicker? A lien on their house from a shady-looking family loan company. They weren't just bitter. They were broke. And they thought my girls were their next paycheck. Lily leaned over my shoulder, her breath hot against my ear. So this was never about us. No, I said, clicking through another bank statement. It's about money. Emma, curled up on the couch with a blanket, let out a wet laugh. That's almost worse. I couldn't argue. Because love, even twisted love, would have been easier to stomach. But greed? That, I knew how to fight. The next morning, I sent copies of everything, the drained accounts, the loan paperwork, the brick through my window, to the pastor. With one added note. Tell your flock to back off. Or I take this to the IRS. The church's lawyer called me within the hour. They were very suddenly interested in peaceful reconciliation. Too bad for them. I was fresh out of mercy. The pastor showed up at my door 3 days later, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His usual polished demeanor was frayed at the edges, wrinkled shirt, unshaven jaw, eyes darting like he expected me to swing at him. I didn't invite him in. Sarah, he began, hands raised in that infuriatingly placating way, we need to talk about this situation. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What's there to talk about? Your congregation vandalized my home. Harassed my children. Helped kidnap one of them. He flinched. Those were extreme actions by a few misguided. Cut the crap, Pastor. My voice was ice. You knew. You all knew. And you turned a blind eye because my ex-MIL spins a good sob story. For the first time, his gaze dropped. Guilt or shame, I didn't care which. The church is willing to cover the damages, he said quietly. And ensure no further contact from any members. I almost laughed. Now they wanted to negotiate. Now that their tax-exempt status was on the line. Here's my offer, I said. You make a public statement. Not some vague prayer request, a full admission that your people targeted me and my kids. And then? I smiled. You keep them away. Because if I so much as see one of your Bible thumpers glance in our direction, I burn it all down. His throat worked. You'd really destroy an entire church over this? I met his eyes. Try me. He left without another word. By Sunday, the announcement had been made. The church's Facebook page, the same one that had once been flooded with pity for my ex-MIL, now featured a stiffly worded post condemning inappropriate conduct by certain members. No names. No specifics. But the message was clear. The comments section was a war zone. Half the congregation was outraged, not at what had been done to us, but at being called out for it. The other half was scrambling to distance themselves, suddenly shocked and appalled by behavior they'd cheered on weeks ago. Hypocrites, every last one of them. But the best part? My ex-MIL's name was nowhere in the post. Because the church had thrown her to the wolves. Just like she'd tried to do to us. Lily grinned when she saw it. They sacrificed her. Yep, I said, sipping my coffee. Emma, still curled under her blanket, peeked over the couch. Do you think she'll finally leave us alone? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, people like her never really stopped. They just found new ways to fester. But for now? For now, we'd won. And as I watched my girls finally relax, really relax, for the first time in months, I let myself believe it might last. At least until the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But then I remembered, wolves don't just slink away. They circle back. And I'd be ready. The call wasn't from my ex-MIL. It was from a social worker. The boys, my ex's affair babies, needed a home. The distant relatives who'd taken them in had backed out. Foster care was the next step. Unless you're still their legal stepmother, the woman said carefully. And given the circumstances, well, the judge asked if you'd consider temporary custody. The room tilted. Lily and Emma froze, staring at me like I'd just announced the sky was green. I should have said no. I almost did. But then the social worker added one last detail, the thing that sealed it. Their grandparents filed for custody too. Of course they had. This was never about love for those boys. It was about control. About money. About winning. And I'd be damned if I let those people near any child ever again. I took a breath. When can I meet them? The girls didn't speak the whole drive to the agency. Lily white-knuckled the wheel. She'd insisted on driving, like she needed something to crush. Emma stared out the window, her face unreadable. I didn't push. This wasn't their burden. But when we walked into that sterile little visitation room, when two tiny boys, 3 and 4 years old, all wide eyes and tangled hair, looked up from their coloring books, something cracked. The younger one smiled. Are you our new mom? And just like that. The war wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about them. Lily made the first move. She knelt beside the older boy, eyeing his half-scribbled dinosaur. T-Rex needs sharper teeth, she muttered, grabbing a red crayon. Emma hesitated, then sat cross-legged next to the little one, quietly fixing his crooked crown drawing. The social worker beamed. They're adjusting so well. I didn't correct her. Because this wasn't forgiveness. This was protection. And as I watched my girls, my warriors, shield those boys without a second thought, I realized something. We weren't just surviving their chaos anymore. We were ending it. For good. The custody hearing lasted 9 minutes. My ex-in-laws didn't even show. Turns out, IRS audits make people very busy. The boys call me Sarah but sneak mom sometimes when they're sleepy. Lily teaches them to draw sharks with absurdly large teeth. Emma lets them braid her hair, badly. And that church? It's half empty now. Turns out, nothing ruins a congregation faster than the truth. As for my ex-MIL? She moved to Florida. Last I heard, she tried suing the church for emotional damages. Some battles aren't worth fighting. But this one? This one was.